If you've ever wondered what it's like to slap people silly on World of Tanks console, look no further than the new buffed T30. This is of course the tank at tier 9 for the American line that is currently on sale at 30% off, at least silver price wise, and you can get a 25% bonus to your XP if going towards this tank within World of Tanks console right now. So make sure that if you haven't got this tank and you're interested in 750 alpha damage that you can consistently pump out against opponents, go hold down and be a complete terror on the battlefield, then of course make your way to the T30. Now, as far as this gameplay, this is a fantastic result on Campenberg, or Erlenberg as it's actually called, but this is a really good showcase of what this tank can do when you keep that 15 centimeter just continuously firing within the game, and it really is just insane how nice this tank feels, and also the accuracy of said tank. Yes, the aim time might be slightly poor, and with the buffs that Wargaming have given the smaller guns on this tank, maybe you could potentially make the argument that you should go for the lower alpha damage, but on this channel we're all about the big guns, so we're making sure that we're using the highest alpha damage gun. And yes, I 3 marked this tank quite a while ago, so it's not recently, so don't go thinking that, yeah, this is how exactly you want to 3 mark it, although I did use the big gun when I was 3 marking the tank anyway, so yeah, make of that what you will. You can see there we managed to pick up an easy shot on the Jagdpanzer E100. Now we swap to APCR rounds, and that's because these rounds have infinite pen. The pen on these rounds are like 330 or something like that, which means that you're pretty much not bouncing off of anything within the game, so I wouldn't worry if you're trying to, like, you know, come up against some of the heavily armoured tanks within World of Tanks. So make sure that what you're doing is just keeping those opponents that, you know, when you can fire, you want to be firing essentially in this tank, because the DPM is not necessarily awful, but it's not overpowered, it's nothing too special. So when it comes down to just like getting the actual damage, then you want to make sure that what you're doing is firing consistently and making sure that you're making those shots count, because you don't get to shoot that many within the current game meta on console, because yeah, for some reason everyone, or every man and their dog, seems to YOLO in. Don't know whether that's because of the French wheelies coming into the meta, but yeah, seems that way anyway. But 1400 damage within 3 minutes, that's a pretty shocking game, but trust me, this gets completely different as the game progresses and you get into a scenario where you can actually fire. Now, one thing that I do want to note there, you saw how inaccurate it was when we bloomed over to the T54E1, and that's because the dispersion of the T30 when using this gun is awful. When you compare it to the smaller gun, which got the buffs, it's almost infinitely different. And so you want to make sure that when you're kind of thinking about which gun to use, you're kind of thinking on the holistic side, am I actually going to consistently deal 750 damage? Am I going to kind of miss? Am I going to actually be able to connect these shots consistently at long ranges? Well, make up your mind, choose the gun that you think is going to benefit you, benefit your playstyle, and then you can kind of move from there as to what you're going to do. Obviously within this game it's not looking too good. 12-9, that is not a good result, and with the opponents kind of coming round on the left hand side as well as straight in front of us, and we're kind of locked in this sort of death lock. But with the T30 you are kind of like this absolute fortress that the opponents can't really do much against. And although we have to take a couple shots there to be able to get rid of the E75, it's 100% worth it. The E75 was going to then badger us, and so taking 600 damage to be able to remove him from the game is entirely worth it. Talking about removing people from the game, the AMX M454, a tier 10 I believe that is, or maybe even a tier 9, and yeah, doesn't really mean much when we've got the APCR rounds, and that's exactly why you need to load some of these premium rounds. They're just armour, just destruction. There's nothing that the opponents can really do, even if they are like a super heavy like that French tier 10, really nothing much more that people can do when you're coming up against the T30 with these premium rounds, and that's what makes it so dangerous. I think what you're seeing here is kind of the average game in the T30, just making sure that you survive, making sure that you're not making silly mistakes. Yes, we had to kind of go out to get that E75, which is not ideal, but if we didn't do that, he could have potentially just continuously spotted us, and then we could have got hit by the RE, and yeah, it could have been really, really bad for us. And so yeah, making sure that we're just kind of staying a little bit consistent, staying as kind of the kind of fortress, the tank that's just going to demolish the other tanks. And talking about demolishing other tanks, there's our counterpart, and 805 hit points down on the enemy T30 makes it a very, very nice result there. On the enemy team we have Nice Memes here, which is actually a very, very good player, one of the ones that we have to worry about, and he is playing in the Badger, which could tear us a new one. So making sure that we get him out of the game and making sure that he is a priority, albeit when we can, making sure that we're not kind of focusing one tank in particular, but also, you know, choosing which targets are the most important, which targets are going to be kind of the most crucial to our game. You're seeing what we're doing here is kind of trying to make sure that we can get a shot on Nice Memes here. A Chai Clan, if you ever see them in the game, they are the ones that will be spamming premium. They're going to be the ones that are going to be able to perform really, really well. These guys have insane kind of win rates overall. I think they might even be the best clan statistically on console. So yeah, if you see them in the game, be worried, at least if they're on the enemy team. Now what you can see, we have a PCR, and the Badger's frontal armour is insane. But one thing that we can note is that we are above the Badger looking down onto that superstructure, which means that we have a good chance of penning. Unfortunately, he manages to kind of ramp up just as we're about to fire at him, and therefore the angle gets worse, and then we don't manage to pen. Talking about not penning, the Malshan's lower plate, it seems like it's all going wrong right now, bouncing 2 shots that we could have quite easily penned, but will we manage to bounce the 3rd shot within this? Well, you just have to wait and see. Can we get the side of the turret of the Malshan? No, another bounce. This is looking awful for us. We need to make sure that we're making these shots count to be able to make sure that we're going to be able to survive, get them out of the game, and be able to move on with our game without being terrorised by either artillery, by that Jaegeru who could take almost all of our hit points, and definitely all of them if he high rolls. And so that is very, very crucial for us at this stage, whilst also keeping an eye on that Badger, because he could, as we talked about before, tear us a new one. The T54E1 on the enemy team's kind of making an aggressive play, or at least like an aggressive defensive play where he's kind of trying to get into a good position to deal with us, or at least some other people. And what we're going for now is the Malshan's lower plate once again, and we do actually manage to find it and connect it here in that one, bringing our damage total up by a further 750. And you'll see that we've only penned like a fair minimal amount of shots within the game, but we've picked up 5,000 damage. And this is why I love high alpha damage tanks, because not only can you set tanks on the enemy team on fire, but you can also just remove the remaining hit points of the enemy tanks. And unfortunately for Nice Memes, he underestimated the fact that we were going to be pre-aiming at that corner, making sure that we weren't just a complete bot, and we managed to catch the inside drive wheel of him, taking him out from the game, and kind of making our chances of winning the game probably infinitely better within this one. Albeit until we try and derp a shot into the T54E1, which goes horrifically wrong, and now we're kind of reversing down the hill. The one thing we've got to be very, very mindful of is, of course, the Sky Artillery, the horrific thing that is in console. Yeah, the artillery, and there we go, 1,000 of our hard kept hit points disappear within a slight moment, and that's where the high or large factor of the T30 comes into like a detriment, I guess, is because that large hull armour, that large engine deck can be a real crucial pivotal role when it comes to artillery, and why it gets taken out so easily by the artillery pieces, because essentially the T30 is like the T29. Obviously T29, T30, they're one after each other. However, this tank has slightly better turret armour, so it's got like the T34-esque turret as opposed to the T29, and you also get that alpha damage increase as well. I think you get slight increases to the hull armour over the T29, at least since the most recent patch, and of course hopefully we can get the T95 out of the game here, and we do manage to do that, which is no problem when you've got APCR rounds, and even the AP rounds probably would have gone through that lower plate if it wasn't an AP round anyway. But Moving on, 6,600 damage done. It's looking like we're not probably going to get any more damage, and this is another key weak point of the T30, albeit it's not really that much of a problem. You've just got to make sure that you position yourself in the right sort of areas to get those shots of damage in when you need to. And the Progetto 66 here on the enemy team, the tier 10 Italian auto-reloading heavy tank, is looking like he's just going to sit behind that building, and we probably aren't going to be able to get a shot. But what we will do is position ourselves for if he manages to come out, or if we can potentially get that final remaining shot on him to grant us a little bit extra damage. Whether or not that happens is entirely down to him. Whichever way he decides to go and whichever way he wants to get taken out is down to him. We clicked the fire button for some reason when I was actually playing. You see the little kind of twist of the reticle there. That's because I did have in fact a lag spike, which is obviously lovely when it happens in the game. That's just due to poor internet. You can see the GW Tiger moving around, and yeah, it's just typical Eclipse internet. But there we go, the GW Tiger's found himself in the drink here, and yeah, I'm not surprised. Typical artillery player deciding that after he's fired he's just going to take himself out from the game, which is probably not necessarily a bad thing, but maybe he could have done it at the start of the game and we would have been 1,000 hit points up. And unfortunately for us, we're not even going to be able to get there before he does eventually take himself out of the game. And yeah, I always hate that. I think you should get banned for a set amount of games if you do drown yourself within the matches. Yeah, I think that definitely should be implemented into the game, but hopefully this showcased what the T30 can do in a kind of longer drawn out engagement, picking up 6,671 damage, 2,009 base XP within this game, mastery badge and 90% on our marks of excellence, albeit this is the first game that I played in it. And yeah, although we did have one of the best games or damage results in the game, we came second to Nice Memes, as I was talking about, with a nice 7,900 damage with the Badger, but albeit we're the ones that won, and so yeah, that's all that's really important within the game, at least for me. So yeah, a great result in the T30. Let's move on to the second gameplay. Now this game is a much quicker game in the T30, and it's playing on Vineyards, a map that probably is quite suited to the T30 since you can get hold down in a lot of positions and you can kind of defend really well, as what the T30 really does quite well. It is a defender. It really does stop people from pushing forward. That 750 alpha really negates any real movement across any open fields, any kind of poking with medium tanks that don't have armor. You can just go straight through them, and that's where I love this tank so much within the game. And of course that's what we're going to be playing it like. If you can do it, why not? And so yeah, although we missed the early shot on the T62A there, which is unfortunate, we're going to have plenty of opportunities to get a couple more rounds, and albeit this is not necessarily the best game that you're ever going to see within the T30, what it is it showcases how you can even do so well when it comes to games that maybe don't go in your favour, and how you can kind of combat and negate the fact that your team maybe kind of disintegrate quickly. And I guess that's a hint as to what happens within this game. This is a tier 10 game, so the T30 typically, I'm not going to lie, comes in up against tier 10s all of the time. And I mean, when you compare the T30 to the T124, you're probably not going to be wanting to play the T30 over it, because the T124 gets the armour, at least for a tier 10, that is actually competitive to a degree, comparatively to the T30, where you can really only go hold down in the tank. You're going to get penned pretty much every single time if they can manage to get any kind of aspect of the hull armour of this tank, which is disappointing, but yeah, I'm not that surprised considering it is like a T29 hull. But moving swiftly on with the gameplay and talking about what you need to do on this map in particular, you can see what we've done is kind of got into a very boring position for the enemy team, and that's because we can get hold down and we can put pressure on any of these tanks that maybe are kind of sitting out in the open or trying to hide or just use camo, and if they get spotted we can derp them for 750. Now that hasn't happened currently within the game, but with 2.5 minutes into the game, you can see that the T30 is like a repeat offender. It doesn't typically do too much until it's kind of a little bit, not late, but until it's kind of needed to do something, and that is where the kind of late game aspect of the T30 comes into play, and why I really enjoy it when you can kind of be that all-in defender. and where you can just halt the opposition from doing anything too interesting. And you can see here we're getting and pre-aiming the Object 907 there, and we derp him for 846, which was of course a high roll by 100 damage, which is something that you won't see all of the time, but yeah, he gets taken out very quickly. I'm not that surprised. And we have a T110E5. We've got a medium that's now progressing as well, and what we'll do is we'll get up into this position and be able to loop a shell over that ridge and clip him straight into the side. Not low rolled on that shot, so we're kind of equal at this point, but yeah, very nicely lined up for the second shot that will be coming in very quickly after. And you can see here, aim, and he's taken a big old chunk of damage. And this is how quickly, when you do reload, and why I talk about making sure that you're using effective DPM, because it's all well and great having like short periods of time where you can just burst out a load of damage and something like the Tortoise, but what about the times when maybe you know, you're not actually able to get out all of those shots? Maybe you only have one opportunity for shot. That's where the high alpha damage comes into the game, and why high alpha is definitely a more effective way of getting damage, albeit it doesn't necessarily have the best alpha damage or the best base DPM that you can get if you were to just sit there one-on-one DPMing each of the opponent's tanks down, and you disregarded any real factor of being able to bounce any rounds. So you can see here, obviously what we can do is just fight on the ridge lines. There's not much that this IS-4 can do, and unfortunately we bounce, which is really annoying. And so I think at this point I'm like, damn it, we're really not looking good. We're 9-7 and our team are all squashed into one very minuscule area of the map. We're not going to bounce this one, however. We put a nice round into him, picking up some extra damage, and we're obviously tracking him as well, which allows our teammates to try and get a couple shots in. It also locks him in place so we can kind of wait and try and deal with him in a second. Now, there is quite a lot of tanks surrounding us, and it's kind of coming to that stage in the game where no matter what you do, you're probably going to be taking some hits. And talking about taking hits, the Chieftain just removes like a third of his hit points there, and that's what the T30 loves doing. If you can just remove those hit points off of the enemy tanks in quick succession, that's exactly what it wants to do. And the IS-6 here, albeit he's aiming, we bounce again, and this is bad aim from me, and that's where, you know, tanks like this can really be negatively impacted. And unfortunately for us, the enemy artillery picks us up, kind of like a last kind of middle finger to the T30 there, and unfortunately we lose the game 8-0, and yeah, it's pretty much wrapped up from there. But 4,500 damage in a pretty short period of time showcases what the T30 can do in those scenarios, and what sort of scenarios you can use it very well, albeit I didn't use it in the best kind of most efficient way within this game, but it shows you where it can come into play. And I guess highlighting in gameplay where maybe I don't do everything perfectly, it's probably a good idea and indication as to how you can do it as well. And yeah, this is a realistic kind of gameplay in the T30, and a more consistent one that you can repeat. So hopefully this video showcased what this new buffed T30 can do within World of Tanks console, and hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I hope that you'll join me in another one coming very soon. Goodbye.